Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone gathered here today. I am truly grateful to stand before you and share a thought that can transform relationships, self-worth, and the way you live your life. So, before we begin, let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt that you are giving too much in a place where you are valued too little? If yes, then this message is especially for you. In life, we often try so hard to stay connected with people. We bend, we compromise, we adjust, we sacrifice. And we keep doing that because we don't want to lose them. We believe that if we step back, everything will fall apart. But sometimes, my friends, stepping back is exactly what is needed. Valuing yourself first is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of emotional maturity and inner clarity. When you understand your worth, you stop seeking validation from the outside world because you already recognize the power and beauty that exists within you. So often in life, we find ourselves adjusting, compromising, shrinking, or softening just to be accepted or to maintain a relationship. We try to please others because we fear that if we do not give endlessly, we will lose them. But in the process of trying to be everything for others, we quietly lose ourselves. The first step toward real confidence and peace is learning to honor yourself before expecting anyone else to honor you. When you value yourself, your decisions change. You no longer entertain situations that drain you or people who belittle you. You learn to say no without guilt because you understand that protecting your energy is not rude, it is necessary. You start choosing environments that nourish rather than diminish you. You begin surrounding yourself with people who encourage your growth, not those who benefit from your silence. Valuing yourself means you no longer accept the bare minimum from anyone, including yourself. This inner value is not about arrogance. It is not about thinking you are superior to others. It is simply about acknowledging your uniqueness, your journey, your efforts, and your potential. Every person has strengths, weaknesses, stories, and scars that have shaped who they are. When you look in the mirror and choose to respect that journey, you are valuing yourself. You stop criticizing your flaws and start appreciating your progress. You begin to recognize that life is not about perfection, it is about self-awareness. When you value yourself, you also become mindful of how you use your time. You no longer waste hours trying to prove your worth to those who are blind to it. You no longer chase conversations where you are unheard. You no longer force love where there is only convenience. Instead, you invest your time into things that bring you peace, growth, and fulfillment. You learn to be comfortable with your own company. You stop fearing loneliness because you understand that solitude is a space for reflection and strengthening, not emptiness. People treat you based on how you treat yourself. If you constantly put others ahead of your emotional well-being, they will assume your needs are not important. If you allow disrespect to continue without addressing it, it becomes normal for them. But when you stand firm with grace, when you communicate your boundaries respectfully, when you choose to walk away from what does not align with your worth, that is when others recognize your value. And those who genuinely love you will respect you even more for it. Valuing yourself also allows you to love others more purely. When your heart is secure, your love is not desperate or needy. You no longer cling to people out of fear of losing them. You love freely, kindly, and confidently, without expecting someone else to complete you. You understand that love is a gift, not a transaction. And you learn that the right people never require you to sacrifice your identity, your dignity, or your peace to be with them. When you learn to value yourself first, you stop surviving life and start living it. You make room for joy. You make room for growth. You make room for people who see your worth even when you are silent. And that, more than anything, is where true inner freedom begins. There is a difference between giving with love and giving to the point of losing yourself. Giving is beautiful when it comes from a place of care, compassion, and sincerity. But when giving becomes one-sided, when it drains your joy, your energy, and your identity, it is no longer kindness. It becomes self-neglect. Many people think that constantly giving, sacrificing, and being available will make them more appreciated, more loved, and more valued. But the truth is, the more you overgive, the more people begin to expect it, and the more they begin to take it for granted. What once was seen as a favor eventually becomes seen as your obligation. And the painful part is that you begin to feel invisible in the very places where you thought your efforts would make you feel accepted. Overgiving often comes from fear, the fear of losing someone, the fear of being seen as difficult, the fear of disappointing others. But you must understand that when you give beyond your emotional capacity, you are not protecting relationships. You are harming yourself. You start absorbing emotional burdens that are not yours to carry. You find yourself apologizing for things that are not your fault. You say yes when your heart is begging you to say no. And little by little, your inner peace begins to fade. You wake up feeling tired not because of work, but because of the emotional weight of giving more than you receive. Healthy relationships, whether friendships, family bonds, or romantic connections, are built on balance. There should be a flow of giving and receiving, of understanding and being understood, of supporting and being supported. When that balance is disrupted, respect begins to fade. The more you give without boundaries, the more others learn that they do not need to reciprocate. It is not that they are unkind. It is that you have taught them that your needs are optional. People learn from your behavior how to treat you. If you keep giving even when you are tired, they will believe you are strong enough to handle everything. If you keep fixing problems for others, they will stop trying. If you keep showing up for people who never show up for you, they will assume you don't need support. Restoring balance starts with awareness. You must learn to pause before giving and ask yourself a simple question. Am I giving from my heart? Or am I giving because I am afraid? When giving is pure, it feels light, it feels joyful. But when giving is forced, it feels heavy and painful. Listen to that feeling. It is your soul asking you to protect your inner harmony. Setting boundaries does not mean you stop caring. It means you start caring for yourself too. You can still be kind, compassionate, supportive, and loving, while also honoring your emotional limits. Saying I cannot right now is not selfish. Taking time for yourself is not neglecting others. Allowing others to take responsibility for their own lives is not abandonment. It is respect for them and for you. When you stop overgiving, something powerful happens. The right people start appreciating you more. They notice the effort you put in. They value your time. They understand your boundaries. And those who only stayed because of what you provided will naturally distance themselves. That is not a loss, that is clarity. You do not lose people when you stop overgiving. You simply lose the ones who were never there for you in the first place. Your heart was never meant to be emptied for others while you leave nothing for yourself. You deserve the same care, attention, and love that you so freely give to others. When you honor your emotional capacity and give mindfully, your presence becomes meaningful, your relationships become healthier, and your life becomes peaceful. Silence is one of the most powerful forms of communication, yet it is often misunderstood. Many people believe that speaking more, explaining more, proving more, or defending themselves constantly will create understanding. But real understanding often begins when words stop. There are moments in life when silence becomes your strength, your dignity, and your wisdom. When a situation feels overwhelming, when someone is not valuing your presence, or when your efforts go unnoticed, stepping back and embracing silence can speak louder than any argument or explanation ever could. Silence is not avoidance. It is not withdrawal out of fear. It is a deliberate choice to protect your peace. When you respond to everything, you exhaust yourself. But when you choose silence, you allow space for clarity. You let the situation reveal itself. You let people show you who they truly are when you are no longer trying to influence their behavior. Sometimes, when you stop speaking, you finally start hearing what your heart has been trying to tell you. Silence allows your mind to settle, your emotions to reset, and your perspective to sharpen. There are times when silence is the deepest expression of strength. Not every battle needs to be fought. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Not every insult needs a reaction. Responding to everything drains your mental and emotional energy. Silence, on the other hand, preserves it. When you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you free yourself from unnecessary stress. You stop wasting energy on situations where your presence is not appreciated. You begin to value your peace more than the need to be right. Silence also reveals truth. When you step back and allow distance, dynamics shift. People start to notice the weight of your absence. They begin to realize the roles you used to fill, the support you quietly offered, the peace you brought. When you are constantly available, your presence becomes part of the background, expected, assumed, unnoticed. But when you remove your presence, even for a little while, its value becomes clear. Silence has the power to show others what they did not see when you were always there. Yet, silence is not coldness. It is not about punishing others. It is about giving yourself the space to breathe, to think, to reflect. Sometimes, words spoken in anger or pain cause more damage than the situation itself. Silence prevents you from reacting impulsively. It gives you time to respond with maturity instead of emotion. It allows you to understand your own feelings rather than being controlled by them. Silence is a pause, not an ending. The world today glorifies noise, constant communication, constant interaction, constant expression. But peace lives in stillness. Strength grows in calmness. Self-awareness deepens in silence. When you learn to be comfortable in silence, you learn to be comfortable with yourself. You begin to realize that your worth does not depend on someone else's response. You stop needing validation from others. You become enough for yourself. There are relationships where silence can heal. Sometimes two people need space to rediscover appreciation. Sometimes distance is needed to remind the heart what truly matters. And sometimes silence becomes the farewell that words could never express. No drama, no arguments, just quiet acceptance that not everything or everyone is meant to stay. Choosing silence is not a sign that you have nothing to say. It is a sign that you understand. Not every situation deserves your voice. Silence is a form of respect for yourself, for your peace, and for your emotional well-being. When used wisely, silence becomes a language of strength, grace, and self-control. It becomes a message that needs no words, but is heard deeply by those meant to hear it. Appreciation often blossoms in the presence of space. When something or someone is constantly available, easily accessible, and always present, it becomes difficult for others to truly understand the value they bring. Familiarity can be comforting, but it can also cause blindness. People start to assume your presence, your efforts, your loyalty, and your kindness as something ordinary, something that will always be there. But when you step back, not out of resentment, but out of emotional maturity, something remarkable happens. Appreciation begins to surface. Creating space is not about distancing yourself to make someone feel guilty. It is about restoring balance in relationships. When you are always the one calling, checking, supporting, and showing up, you unintentionally teach others that you do not need the same. You teach them that you will stay no matter what, and in that comfort, they forget to reciprocate. Your consistency becomes part of the background, unnoticed. Yet when you step away gently, people finally begin to see the role you played in their lives, the encouragement you offered, the emotional support you gave, the peace your presence provided. Space allows perspective. It gives others the opportunity to reflect, to realize, to feel. When your voice is no longer heard every day, they begin to wonder about your silence. When your messages no longer appear, they start to look for your words. When your support is no longer instant, they understand how much strength you silently gave. Absence is not meant to break connections. It is meant to reveal their depth. If the connection is real, the bond will hold even when there is distance. If it was one-sided, the silence will expose the imbalance. Creating space is an act of self-respect. It is choosing peace over pressure. It is choosing emotional clarity over emotional exhaustion. It is giving yourself room to breathe, to focus, to grow, and to recharge. You cannot pour endlessly from a cup that is empty. You cannot be a steady foundation for others when you are crumbling inside. Space allows you to reconnect with yourself and rebuild your emotional strength. It is not running away, it is returning to yourself. When you create space, you also give others the chance to step forward. Often, people do not contribute simply because they have never needed to. They assume you will handle everything. But when you pause, when you stop holding the weight alone, those who truly care will naturally put in effort. They will reach out. They will ask how you are. They will notice the difference. They will take responsibility. And those who do not, their silence becomes your clarity. Space also deepens the quality of connection. When two people return after distance, they return with awareness. They return with a stronger sense of what matters. They return with gratitude. The relationship becomes intentional instead of habitual. Appreciation replaces assumption. Value replaces expectation. However, creating space requires emotional discipline. There will be moments of doubt, moments of loneliness, moments where your heart questions whether stepping back was the right choice. But the peace that follows is not temporary. It is grounding. It helps you see relationships with honesty rather than attachment. You begin to differentiate between those who love your presence and those who only love your convenience. In the end, when you create space, you allow love to become a choice, not a habit. You allow respect to rebuild itself naturally. You allow appreciation to rise from the quiet. And most importantly, you remind yourself and others that your presence is meaningful, not something to be taken for granted, but something to be cherished. Focusing on self-growth is one of the most empowering decisions you can make because it shifts your attention from seeking validation outside to building strength within. Many people spend their lives trying to impress others, trying to be accepted, trying to fit in, or trying to be loved. But the most meaningful transformation happens when you stop trying to be visible to the world and start working on becoming admirable to yourself. Growth is an internal journey. It is quiet, consistent, and personal. It requires discipline, patience, and honesty. And when you commit to your growth, your presence naturally begins to carry weight. You do not need to announce your progress. It becomes visible in your confidence, in your calmness, and in the way you handle life. Self-growth begins with self-awareness. It requires you to look at yourself without excuses, to understand your habits, your triggers, your strengths, and your weaknesses, to acknowledge where you are without judgment and decide where you want to be. This internal honesty can be uncomfortable because it reveals truths we often avoid. But growth cannot happen without awareness. When you recognize the areas in your life that need improvement, you gain the power to transform them. You begin to make choices that align with your goals instead of your fears. You start focusing on habits that build your strength rather than drain your energy. As you grow, you become less reactive. You stop allowing every opinion, every criticism, or every setback to disturb your peace. You learn to respond with clarity instead of reacting with emotion. You begin to understand that peace is a form of power, and you protect it. Growth teaches you to observe instead of absorb. You start choosing your battles wisely. You recognize that not everything needs your attention and not everyone deserves your energy. This calmness is not something you announce. It is something people notice in the way you carry yourself. Self-growth also shifts the way you see relationships. Instead of seeking validation or affection, you seek connection and mutual respect. You stop chasing people who are indifferent to your presence. You stop holding on to relationships that drain your spirit. You become more discerning about who you allow into your emotional space. You begin to value depth over attention, quality over quantity, peace over excitement. Grow teaches you that the right people are drawn to your strength, not your struggle to be seen. As you invest in your growth, your priorities change. You start putting effort into things that nurture your mind, your body, and your soul. You learn the importance of discipline, waking up early, learning something new, taking care of your health, developing emotional intelligence, and pursuing meaningful goals. You begin to understand that true confidence is not loud, it is steady. It comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will no longer allow into your life. The more you grow, the more you outgrow. You outgrow unhealthy patterns, limiting beliefs, temporary distractions, and environments that no longer support your evolution. This process can feel lonely at times because growth separates you from the version of yourself that was once comfortable. But that loneliness is not emptiness. It is the space required for transformation. It is where your new identity forms. It is where your strength matures. Self-growth ultimately makes your presence powerful. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to explain yourself. You simply become someone whose value is recognized without words. And when you reach that stage, you no longer chase to be seen. You are naturally noticed, respected, and remembered. Letting go with peace is one of the most profound emotional transitions a person can experience. It requires strength, maturity, and a clarity of heart that understands not everything or everyone is meant to stay. Many people hold on tightly to relationships, situations, or memories because they fear the emptiness that may follow. Yet, holding on to what has already ended does not preserve happiness. It only prolongs pain. To let go with peace is to acknowledge that the chapter has served its purpose and that moving forward is not a loss. It is an act of self-respect. There comes a time when you must recognize the difference between loyalty and self-sacrifice. Loyalty means standing with someone through honesty, respect, and mutual effort. Self-sacrifice, on the other hand, means diminishing yourself in order to keep someone else comfortable. When you find yourself constantly explaining your worth, pleading for attention, or trying to fix everything while receiving little in return, it is time to step back. Love, friendship, respect. These are things that should never require begging. The moment you begin to chase, you begin to lose yourself. Letting go with peace means allowing life to unfold without resisting every change. People grow. Circumstances change. Priorities shift. Sometimes two paths simply no longer lead in the same direction. You do not need to create conflict or anger to part ways. You do not need to blame the other person or yourself. You simply accept that the time together, whether long or short, has contributed something to your journey. Every connection holds meaning, even the ones that do not last forever. What matters is that you release it without bitterness. Peaceful letting go also means releasing the desire to control outcomes. You may wish things had turned out differently. You may wish someone had stayed. You may wish a situation had healed instead of broken. But acceptance brings calmness. When you stop forcing what is not flowing naturally, you make room for new opportunities, new relationships, new growth. You begin to trust that life has a rhythm of its own, and that every ending is secretly guiding you toward a new beginning. There is a quiet dignity in stepping away without creating noise. You do not need dramatic goodbyes or emotional confrontations to prove that something mattered. Sometimes the most powerful farewell is silence, the kind that holds gratitude instead of resentment. It is the silence that says, I learned, I grew, and now I release. This kind of letting go carries grace. It leaves no wounds behind. It allows both hearts to heal in their own time and in their own way. Letting go with peace also reconnects you with yourself. When you stop clinging to what is no longer aligned with your spirit, you return to your own center. You begin to rediscover your identity, your dreams, your passions, your strength. You shift from seeking fulfillment through others to cultivating fulfillment within yourself. This is where emotional independence begins. The heart becomes stronger, wiser, and more open, not closed. Forgiveness plays an essential role in letting go peacefully. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means removing the emotional weight you have been carrying. It means freeing yourself from resentment so your heart can breathe again. When you forgive, you reclaim your power. You choose healing over hurt. You choose clarity over confusion. You choose peace over pain. Letting go with peace is not the end of love. It is the evolution of love. It means loving yourself enough to walk away from what no longer nourishes you. It means trusting that you are deserving of balance, respect, and emotional harmony. And when you choose peace, you do not lose. You simply make space for what is meant to find you next. As I conclude, I want you to carry one thing in your heart. Your worth is not measured by how much you give to others, but how much you honor yourself. The more you value yourself, the more the world will value you. Learn to step back, learn to pause, and let your absence speak what your presence could not. Thank you so much for listening. Stay blessed, stay peaceful, stay valuable.